Coming up on This Week in Radio Tech, Mark Persons is our guest. He's the SBE Engineer of the Year, and he's got some interesting stories to tell and share in this amazing picture of 4-year-old Mark climbing high. It's all coming up on TWiRT. This Week in Radio Tech is brought to you by Broadcasters General Store with outstanding service, savings, and support online at bgs.cc. By the Ruby console from Lawo. See Lawo in your future at lavo.com/TWiRT. By Angry Audio. Audio problems disappear when you get angry at angryaudio.com. And by the CalRec Type R console system. Type R is a brand new, modular, expandable IP-based radio system from CalRec Audio. Hey, welcome into This Week in Radio Tech, the show where we talk about everything from the microphone to the light bulb at the top of the tower. I'm Kirk Harnack, your host. Delighted to be here. And where's here? Well, hey, my full-time job, the nice folks at the Telos Alliance sent me over to Shreveport, Louisiana to meet some folks at a TV station here. And we might have a few minutes to talk about that during the show today. That's not why we're doing the show today, but I'm at KTBS Television. That's the ABC affiliate in Shreveport, Louisiana. They also have the CW affiliate on Channel 21. So glad to be here. And they graciously, Dale Cassidy, the Director of Engineering here at KTBS, graciously allowed me to use this extra studio that they sometimes do some sports shows from to do This Week in Radio Tech. So this is my home away from home today, and just delighted to be here. So thanks a lot. By the way, great internet here too. Oh my goodness. All right. It's the show where we're going to talk with Mark Persons, our guest, but we'll get to Mark in a minute. Let's bring in my co-host. He's been here forever and a day, and that is Chris Tobin. Hey, Chris, welcome in.
Hello, Kirk. I hope you guys can hear me. I had to adjust the microphone a bit. But yeah, I'm on location. Yeah. Good. I'm on location in the Catskills in New York, up in the mountains at a Boy Scout camp. We're doing the internet turn-up. Yes, I see the face. What's that look?
I was going to guess the Boy Scout camp just because of the wood paneling behind you. I thought that looks kind of campy.
Oh, it's campy, all right. Yeah, and the color of the wood is what you're seeing reflecting on my face from the light, regardless of what I've tried to do to balance it out. But yes, I am up here in the woods on 13,000 square acres of land, and it's that time of year to get some internet going in other parts of the camp at the administration buildings, and that's what I'm up here this weekend doing.
We've done a show on how you got Wi-Fi access in different parts of the camp. So. Are you expanding that, making it better? What's the deal?
Yes, we're expanding it. One portion of the camp, we did it on a 900 meg link, and it's somewhat restricted in bandwidth, so we're trying to expand it to 5.8. So tomorrow we'll be testing a link from a high point, up on a hill, and then down the hill, about a mile down is the other camp, through the trees that have been cut away a bit because of the power lines. And we're going to try and do a point-to-point 5.8 between the two, see how that works. So it should be fun to try and shoot 5.8 through the woods. It's going to be interesting.
Hey, so when you're mounting some of these antennas, you mentioned power lines. Do you have any availability or right to mount any of your radios on power poles?
We have used one or two of the poles at street level, if you will. I won't say up above at the high voltage side. We've had access to one or two, but we don't. I try to avoid that only because if they have to do work and stuff, that interrupts the operation. So I stick with what the camp has control over, and which is actually about 90% of the poles, so it's even better. But yeah, we've used a couple of poles to make things work. But the primary points of presence, I'll call them, are owned and operated by the scouting organization, and we have full control, so it works out nice. And so far, we've turned up 3 of the 4 camps, and everything has come online perfectly. It's survived the winter, and we're going to have some good times. It's working out nice. It's amazing how 5.8 works through the woods.
Well, I was going to ask about that, and then we can I'm sure chat about that either this show or a later show. But if you could get on power poles, and I realize there's things about being it's not your pole probably, but at least the trees are generally cut in a path.
That's correct.
So
That's correct.
As long as the line, the utility line, is a straight shot, pole to pole to pole to pole to pole, you can you've got somebody else clears the trees out. Right.
Well, that's what we're taking advantage of tomorrow. There's a utility line being fed from at a water tank location up on a hill. It goes right down the hillside to the camp, and it's cut out for the utility poles. So I said, why not try maybe we can point to point. The nice thing is, and I know everyone's out there going, oh, yeah, but Fresnel zones, you can't do it. The Fresnel zone, how are you going to get the height? I actually discovered, 2 RF engineers I talked to over the last couple of years said it's feasible. They wouldn't say it's, you can predict it, but it's feasible. Fresnel zones are based on reflections, right? Back to the primary. Think of it as like out of phase RF. What if part of your path doesn't reflect? There's no Fresnel to reflect back to. There's no reflection. Well, believe it or not, I tested that theory on one of our links that goes across treetops. When I go above the treetops, right, really above, say the treetop line here is about 85, 90 feet. So we went up about 110 feet up above. Believe it or not, we lost, the bit error rate went up. The signal strength quality went down. I brought the antennas down just a bit where they skim the top of the trees. We now pass 450 megabits between the link.
I remember you telling me about that phenomenon. Not expected.
And we try. I did this 3 times, up and down, up and down. They're like, nope, yep, perfect. And now that's been that way for 2 years, and it's still working. We just checked about a half hour ago, and the link is still there, and the trees are growing in.
Wow.
Go figure.
Wow. Wow. Interesting.
But yeah,
we need to do more experiments with this in a, like putting Wi-Fi in a cave, and we need to line the cave walls with something fuzzy. So it'd be we call it fuzzy cave propagation, and it is actually additive instead of destructive to the.
Well, if you're working in an iron ore cave or anything with metal, I know the fuzzy cave. I get it. But hang on, let me get my lights out here. There we go.
Oh, well, let's put a stop to the nonsense and bring our serious guest, and that is Mark Persons. Mark has been on the show before. Mark, so glad to see you from Brainerd, Minnesota. Welcome in.
Well, thanks. It's fun to be on your show. On previous shows, we talked about my dad's life in broadcast engineering, and I think today would be a great time to talk about my life following his life in broadcast engineering.
Well, it's a fascinating story, and I know that we have some amazing pictures to show, including a 4-year-old tower climber. So that's coming up in just a minute. Mark, I'm so glad you're able to take a few minutes to talk to us, and we should mention right off the top of the show here, Mark Persons is coming to us now with he has this metal, and it's very flexible. He can either wear it on a chain around his neck, or it's this enormous belt buckle. It's the SBE's Engineer of the Year award. Mark, what do you have to say about that?
I think you're saying more than it really is, but just to tell everyone, the SBE is a 5,000 member international organization, and gosh, here I was selected as Engineer of the Year. Well, that's a real honor. I was really surprised.
Well, I wasn't surprised at all when they mentioned your name. I don't think I was on the committee, but I was in the board meeting when that was mentioned, and they mentioned your name, and I don't remember if I shook my head or I said about time, one or the other. Anyway, so Mark Persons is coming up. We've got some stories to tell, pictures to show, and we're going to walk away with some good advice because Mark is certainly full of it. That is good advice. Good advice. So that's coming right up. Hey, our show This Week in Radio Tech is brought to you in part by the folks at Broadcasters General Store and Inovonics. Hang on, we'll continue in just a minute.
The Aaron 655 is the latest addition to the Inovonics family of rebroadcast receivers, designed specifically for FM broadcast translators, also referred to as relay transmitters. The Aaron 655 is unique as an uncompromising DSP-based HD radio and FM receiver combined with a powerful 3-band audio processor and dynamic RDS encoder. IP connectivity adds streaming capabilities, and a web browser interface gives you total remote control of the unit from any PC or mobile device. The Aaron 655 gives you maximum flexibility for program sources. Select program audio from analog FM, digital channels HD1 through 8, streaming sources, and analog or AES digital line inputs, all with assignable failover audio backup. The internal RDS encoder allows you to customize your RDS messaging. You can use incoming off-air RDS data, convert HD radio pad data to RDS, convert streamed metadata to RDS, or receive IP telnet data. Comprehensive audio processing includes gated and windowed AGC, a unique syllabic leveler, 3 bands of compression, and both wideband and independent HF limiting. Easy setup is achieved by using 10 factory presets and 10 customizable presets. The processor also supports day parting, allowing automatic preset changes to follow different programming formats throughout your broadcast day. The front panel has an OLED display and jog wheel with intuitive menus for easy setup, advanced control, and editing for all operating parameters. The Aaron 655 dynamic web interface gives you total remote control of the unit from any PC or mobile device. A comprehensive set of menus includes a quick overview of now playing info, input-output control, processor options, RDS encoder, alarms and notifications, SNMP settings, and much more. You can also listen to the live audio broadcast streamed through the web interface.
That's the Inovonics Aaron 655, and a really amazing box it is. Very popular. A lot of folks are buying these things and really putting them to good use. So check it out. Call the folks at BGS, Broadcaster General Store, at 352-622-7700. That's 352-622-7700, or go to the website, bgs.cc. bgs.cc. Thanks a lot to the folks at Inovonics and BGS for sponsoring This Week in Radio Tech. All right, let's jump right into it. Kirk Tobin. All right. Slow down. Kirk Harnack, Chris Tobin, and Mark Persons all here. And I was going to refer here some of my notes. Mark, as you mentioned, your dad was in broadcasting and even wrote a book that I was delighted to narrate. That was a lot of fun, and I'm not a big reader, but man, I sure enjoyed that book. That was good subject matter. And then you came along and, in a way, followed in Dad's footsteps, but you took a little bit of a different path. And I think maybe your story is best told by some of these pictures. If you would like to, Mark, kind of call for the first one when you're ready and jump right in. But in the meantime, regale us with your story.
Okay. How about the tower one for a photo, if you don't mind? And basically, those aren't my feet, but I think I've followed in the footsteps of this particular tower climber. You'll also notice that the safety belt there is the old type that goes back to the 1920s, which we just can't do anymore because it's all OSHA stuff. But the next slide will show you how.
And by the way, that looks like a Wind Charger brand tower. Do you happen to know if it is?
It sure is. It sure looks that way. I wouldn't say it's anything different. So
those things hurt your feet. I got to tell you, they hurt your feet.
Okay.
Oh my God! Look at that.
Well, this is me. This is me at age 4. My folks must have known, or at least suspected it, when they saw this happen. That's my mother, and so it was the beginning of a lifetime of enjoying going to high places. And the next slide will tell you that's let's see, Tower 2. That's me, of course, up on a Roan 25, arranging some antennas at age 16, probably, maybe 17. So that's I've never had a fear of heights. It's just something that I do now. I'm not a tower climber. I don't go up towers to erect antennas and all that kind of stuff. But anything under 100 feet, I'm there in an instant. I love it.
Mark, I got to stop you. I pause you right here for 1 second. I got to ask you about not having any fear of heights. So when you climbed a tower for the very first time, you weren't afraid of the height? Really?
No, because I was told that if other people could do it, that I could do it too. So I followed that philosophy through my life. And that also went with me in the military. That getting through basic training was no easy task. It was very difficult. But I knew that if others had done it, I could do it too.
So I got to ask Chris the same question. Chris, you've climbed a few towers. How about the first time you climbed? Were you scared, knees knocking?
I will say apprehensive, yes. Knees knocking, no. But I grew to appreciate what the tower climbers do for a living. And I will tell you that was... My first climb was, it was a guide tower 350 feet up, and it was on a day that the winds were about 20 miles an hour, and I heard things whipping around me that I had never experienced before on the ground. I'm going, this is interesting. And I also got to participate in the physics of a structure and wind dynamics, and the vortexes that are created around an object when the wind blows for high and low pressure, because it was twisting. I actually felt the tower moving. So I'm thinking to myself, wow, I'm 350 feet up, I'm strapped in, and the structure I'm on is actually moving. I can feel it, unlike a building that you don't usually feel unless you're in a very high skyscraper. And I'm like, wow, this is fascinating. And I tell you, it took me a while to get used to not letting go of one hand on the tower, for that more than 100% connection.
Mark,
but I also learned lanyards on my tools made a lot of sense.
Yeah. Mark, we'll continue with the pictures in 1 second. I got to tell you, I'm so glad you said, Mark, that you figured if somebody else could do it, you could too, because my first tower climbing experience was it was like a 60-foot tower, and I just had to go. It was an EAS. It was an FM antenna for the EAS receiver, and I could see from the ground the wire was broken. I climbed about halfway up and going, I can't do this, and went back down. By the way, I had no safety equipment, nothing, absolutely nothing. And I climbed about 3/4 the way up, and I thought, oh gosh, I climbed back down. I thought, if other people can do this, I can too. Now I didn't know what kind of safety equipment I was supposed to have. And the third time was the charm. I said, if I can, boy, I can do it too. And the third time I got up there, fixed the problem with one arm latched through the tower and twisted the wires back together, and got the EAS system working for them again, or EBS at that time actually. So. Sorry for the sidebar, Mark, but it's so good to hear your rationale. If somebody else can do this, I can do it too.
Absolutely. So let's move on. I think the next photo shows me teaching electronics in the Army. And it's not a very good photo, but that's that skinny guy in the back by the chalkboard is me. And when I was young, age 19, I knew that I felt that I should do my part for my country. So I actually enlisted in the Army. Actually, it was the time of the Viet Nam War, and I was frightfully afraid of going there. But I figured rather than being an infantryman with a 2-year draft, I went for 3 years. And they promised me electronics, which I did. And they were so short of people that I wound up being a teacher almost right away at Fort Monmouth, New Jersey. And it just went on from there.
Beautiful. Well, nice. I like the picture. Power supply.
Yeah. Power. Well, can't you tell? And look at that. There's a series pass transistor, linear power supplies. That was before we had switching supplies. Imagine that. Yeah.
All right. What's next?
Let's move. Yeah. Okay. I did wind up in Vietnam, and the handsome guy there is me in an aircraft called the OV-1 Mohawk. And I did avionics. That was the kind of electronics I got to do. But that was the radio equipment and the navigation equipment and all that kind of stuff. And IFF, identification, friend and foe, that was all brand new then. I had to go to school for that. But they didn't actually train me in avionics, but because I knew electronics, I just fell into it. And the IFF was brand new. That's another story unto itself. Let's move on to the next slide.
Okay. All right.
Here we are in an electronics shop, and I'm working on one of the radios there. And let's see, what shows, I think, in the next slide is the actual aircraft. And this one it's twin turboprop. It's 1,400 horse per engine. There's 2 passengers, there's a pilot and a high-tech radar operator. And that funny-looking horizontal boom under the fuselage is a side-looking airborne radar. And its job was to look into the jungle and many times through the canopy of the jungle to see enemy movements down below, which it could do, and it actually worked. Marvelous.
Could it detect people, or more? It would detect equipment.
Movement. It was actually I'm sorry. Boy, don't ever get old. It's a Doppler radar.
Okay.
And I didn't actually work on that part of it, but that was so it could see movement. Even though the aircraft is moving along at 300 miles an hour, it could see differences in movement between the ground and other equipment. Can you imagine that?
Wow. Wow. Oh my gosh. No idea that was available.
So anyway, after that was over with, I came back to civilian life, and I don't know what the next slide is. My fear of heights didn't leave me. Here I am at the top of the IDS building in Minneapolis. Now, the IDS is, wait a minute, where are my notes on this one here? 57 stories, 775 feet. And you see the wall behind me? It's kind of like waist high, maybe.
Yeah.
That's the only protection. I'd lean over and look down, and maybe the heavy part of my body was over the top. I could have just fallen right over, but that was. But I didn't mind. It was. I got a good view from up there.
I bet.
Also, yeah, and I was up there for another reason. The reason was because there was more than one broadcast transmitter up there, and I was up there with a spectrum analyzer to do measurements and that kind of thing. But I said, "Oh, let's go out up on the roof and look around." Of course, it was winter time, but even so, it was a good view that day.
Nice. Yeah, and cold.
Yeah. Okay.
Oh, there we go.
Okay. All right. This is my shop. And this is after my hair turned a little lighter color. I spent a lot of time repairing FM exciters, in addition to doing all the field work that I did for broadcast stations. But this was where I really belonged. Was I'd bring in an exciter like a BE FX 50, and it's a $5,000 box. And $1,000 later, the thing could go out the door working like it was brand new. And I think a lot less of that is being done today. Certainly the factories, well, I think BE will do that one, but you talk to Harris and, like a THE1 exciter or any of those exciters from that era, they don't want to talk to you about it. It's over with for them. They've moved on to new equipment, and that's where I found a niche in actually keeping these things running, and I enjoyed it a lot.
So let me ask you about, you said you worked on a lot of FM exciters, and when I was a contract engineer, Mark, I fixed a few exciters, and I kind of found it enjoyable, and I don't know why. Why do you think exciters were exciting to you?
Oh, now there's a question for you. No, it's a piece of equipment I can work on. So it's not like the later ones where they were far more complicated. They had a digit that came out, and you had two sets of dip switches to throw to make it come on frequency. And I'm going, why is this? And about that point, I said, I think I'm going to retire. But up until then, I started doing component level troubleshooting in the Army. Oh, I'm sorry. I started doing that long before the Army. I was into radio at age 5, learning these things with tools in my hands. And my folks built a station when I was 7, and I wasn't a lot of help at the time, but I sure knew what was going on. And then at age 16, I helped build a radio station in Brainerd, Minnesota, right here where I live today. And I did most of the wiring because that was what I did. All I needed was some husky person to move the transmitter in place, and I'd connected it up. Of course, I was already an amateur radio guy. I mean, I did that at age 16, and electrons flow in the wires of an amateur radio rig just the same as they do in a broadcast rig. It's the way electronics works, but it's gotten awfully complicated lately with large scale integrated circuits and no documentation. I mean, I love to open a book and see the schematics and trace down the problem. Oh, here it is. It's right here. It's this darn capacitor right here. Do you know I even had an exciter sent to me from Hong Kong? And it was I think it was the Harris THE1. And they had worked on it, couldn't find the problem. I got it, replaced the capacitor, put it up, tuned it up, sent it back. It cost more to ship it than it was for the repair.
Wow.
And from Hong Kong.
Wow.
How dumb is that? And stuff came in from Canada. CBC in Canada had me work on and update some exciters. I got into putting in different RF palettes in FM exciters to replace the output amplifiers, which were, where you couldn't get the transistors anymore, where it just wasn't going to happen. So replacing the output circuit card with a palette, and those came from Broadcast Concepts down in Florida, and I'd make them all work, and it just really felt good to renew something that otherwise would have been thrown in the trash.
Mark, thinking about, for quite a few decades, engineers like you, like me, like Chris, like a lot of the folks watching or listening to this podcast, we had a lot of traditionally designed circuits with incremental improvements along the way. And in the last, 10, 12, 15 years or so, we've seen a lot of advances, if you will, in, let's take, for example, exciters, where now it's a computer. It's a numerically controlled oscillator. It's no longer, a free running oscillator that gets bent up and down and has a phase lock loop to hold it, near frequency, but lets it, get modulated up and down in frequency. In other words, as you alluded to, today's equipment seems a lot of it is less serviceable, although there are still some things you can do. And I just wonder, how does that make you feel? You said, hey, I retired at the right time, but how does that make you feel about today's technology being a little bit non-serviceable?
Well, it's become throwaway technology. And I guess the stuff is better, but you know what? It's better until it breaks. And when it breaks, what are you going to do? You're just going to throw it away. And I guess you're going to buy something new to replace it. But I felt so good about keeping this stuff running. And I'm also big on recycling. I'm constantly bringing in old equipment that no longer has a use in this world, but the parts are good. I put them into inventory, and then I wind up with, aluminum in one recycle bin, and copper in another, and wire in another. And I go down to the recycling place, and gosh, they give me $20, and I'm a happy guy. They actually paid me to do what I think is right for our world.
Okay. Chris, I know you've done a little bit of bench work. Well, maybe I don't know if you've done bench work. Tell me about your own troubleshooting, Chris, and because I've never seen you sitting at a bench fixing something.
Oh, I have. Yeah, I have. Early in my career, I've done it. I still do it. Matter of fact, I'll be doing it out here tomorrow, working on a couple of repeaters, UHF repeaters. We're doing some circuit board work. But yeah, I've done it. I mean, I don't do enough of it to enjoy what I used to do, but it's still fun. And sadly, a lot of stuff you can't put on the bench unless you have the surface mount tools and all the necessary, the proper, jigs, if you will. But yeah, I still do a lot of component work. Matter of fact, let's see, a couple of weeks ago, I worked with a guy from Gates Air. Yeah, we worked on a TV transmitter, and we had a couple of component things working on the exciter. That was fun. Digital TV modulation and stuff. Not bad.
Okay, were you interfacing with lead-free solder? I had something in the shop the other day, yes. A piece of consumer gear, and it had this lead-free solder, and replacing a component was like pulling teeth. I had to put leaded solder in there just to get the connection loose enough so I could pull things apart. Have you experienced that too?
Absolutely. I have worked on many pieces of equipment with the RoHS compliant solder and the lead-free, and the wetting temperatures, everything about it is different. And I totally forgot about it until one day working on a piece of equipment. I'm like, why is this not properly flowing? What? Oh, I know what this is. I did the same thing you did. I took some of my traditional, solder flux material and let's see what happens when I do this. Boom. It was perfect. Yeah. It's annoying.
My plan is to die of lead poisoning when the time comes. So it's fine with me. It's okay.
Well, I keep the fan blowing with the air. I keep the air going over, so I'm not inhaling any fumes. So I'm minimizing my exposure. I'm sure over time, maybe when I'm 92 or 93, somebody will discover my blood. Oh, look, you got excessive lead. How could that happen?
Well, I remember hearing about a guy who used to chew on solder. course, the rosin probably got him first, but
Yeah, absolutely.
We are in the middle of a conversation with Mark Persons, and we've got more pictures to look at, and I'll also be talking with Mark about how he teaches some of his learning, some of his knowledge to new people as part of his mentoring program, or the mentoring program that he participates in from the Society of Broadcast Engineers. So I'm curious to hear about that. So we've got more pictures, more stories, and more techniques and tips coming right up. You're watching or listening to This Week in Radio Tech, episode 448. Kirk Harnack, Chris Tobin, and Mark Persons, the SBE Engineer of the Year, are all along with you, and we're glad that you're with us. Our show is brought to you in part by the folks at CalRec. Hang on. Oh, and also brought to you by the folks at Angry Audio. Yeah. Well, at Angry Audio, guests are only human, and humans cough and they sniff and they clear their throats even on the air. Well, you can cure this with the Guest Gizmo. You press the cough button, mute the mic. Every guest needs one. You know what else guests need? Headphones, which is why each Guest Gizmo has a studio-quality headphone amp with individual volume control. And you've seen those mic arms with the built-in LED tallies? They're gorgeous. But how do you light them up? Well, the Guest Gizmo does that too, illuminating the red light whenever the mic is hot. Installing the Guest Gizmo in your studio furniture is easy. You just need a 2 3/4-inch hole saw and a steady hand. No router required. Your studio gets a clean, custom appearance, and you get all the credit. Beautiful. Check out the Guest Gizmo and all the other cool gadgets at angryaudio.com. That's angryaudio.com. And isn't that amazing? A 2 3/4-inch round hole saw, and you put that square
CalRec's Type R is a modular, expandable IP-based radio system featuring 3 slimline panels, a fader panel, a large soft panel, and a small soft panel, easily configured to give the operator full control. Layouts are saved and recalled quickly between shows. A single 2RU core with integrated I/O gets customers up and running fast, and that single core can power up to 3 independent mixing environments with no sharing of DSP resources. Available in 4 DSP packs, and as your station grows, larger packs can be added, enabling it to grow with you. Power to the surface is supplied via standard PoE switches, keeping cabling to a minimum. Type R is fully AES-67 compatible, as defined by SMPTE 2110, which means that it is also compliant with NMOS discovery and connection management specs. All these features combined make Type R the most flexible radio console you can buy. Find out more at calrec.com/TWiRT.
Thanks so much to CalRec. Go to calrec.com/TWiRT. It'll let them know that you came here because you heard it here. We really appreciate that. We appreciate you going and visiting any of our clients, any of our sponsors on This Week in Radio Tech. It really does help us out, and it helps them out when you go and visit. So check them out. All right. It's Kirk Harnack with Chris Tobin and Mark Persons on episode number 448 of This Week in Radio Tech. And Mark is doing his usual good job of regaling us with some stories. But, it's interesting to find out how people got into broadcast engineering or electronics and where they learned their craft, how they perfected their craft or got better at it, and now what they're doing about passing their craft on. So, hey, Mark, do you want to hit some more pictures? Would this be a good time to hit more of those?
We could do that. I thought I'd make one quick mention. You remember I said I helped at age 16 build a radio station? Well, yeah. I have 2 pieces left over. One is this microphone. It's a Gates G100. It's a relabeled Electro Voice mic. And I think the next photo is a BC1G transmitter from Gates, if we can see that, if I'm not mistaken.
Oh, we'll see if Suncast can pop up the next picture. I know he's got a lot of controls to manipulate there. There we go. Oh, look at that.
Well, guess what? This is the transmitter that I installed at age 16 in 1964. It came back to my garage because it was no longer needed as a standby. It had been a standby for, or in the transmitter building for 50 years. It was replaced and kept as a standby with a Harris MW1A transmitter back in the 80s, and that MW1 now is the backup for a newer Nautel J1000. So there was, and this had to go in order for the building to be remodeled. So I wound up selling it to an amateur radio guy in Minneapolis. His job, he's thinking that he's going to change that. He's going to move it to 160 meters for amateur radio stuff, a 1 kilowatt AM. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So those were the two pieces of equipment I had left over, and all I have now is the microphone and my good looks.
Did you ever shock yourself in any way from that transmitter?
Oh, I don't know that happened from. Yeah, I might have. I got a few shocks along the way. You realize interlocks are supposed to prevent that, but you know darn well that in order to do some troubleshooting, you've got to open it up and defeat the interlocks, which is a terrible thing to do. You should not do it. Don't take that as a testimony for doing it. But sometimes I had to get in there with a voltmeter and find out what was going on. And there's a potential there. And that's when you really need a second person around if you're going to pull a number like that. But no, I never got enough shocks serious enough. I'll tell you what on an ordinary POTS telephone line, the ring voltage is 90 volts at 20 to 30 hertz. And if you happen to have your hands across one of those lines, as I have had several times in my life while I'm doing some work on a phone line, remember? Bang. Boy, is that a shocking experience. Try that sometimes. That's it. Here, hold these two wires, and I'll call that phone that's on that line. And when it goes to ring, you'll know about it.
I had an older telephone technician mention the same thing to me, and he said the worst thing, he says, is when you're on a hot, sweaty Louisiana day and you're a lineman and you're up on the pole and you're splicing things together and you happen to be touching the copper wires at the same time Mabel makes a phone call. He says it makes your teeth rotate around in their sockets and you get that metal taste in your mouth. Just,
ouch. Oh, man. On a hot, sweaty day, I can understand that one. That makes a lot of sense. So I can also tell you another story here. I remember a few years ago, just before I retired, a client had me moving this audio console, an analog audio console, and I said, now listen, this is the fourth time I've installed this console. Fourth time, went in new, then it got moved here and it got moved there and all that stuff. I says, it's over with. This is the last time I'm ever going to install this audio console. And it came true because I retired shortly thereafter. And I think their next plan is to go digital, of course.
Shall we move along with some pictures?
Oh, sure. What else we got?
Do we have more? Yeah.
Okay. This was the Society of Broadcast Engineers gathering in Boston, just outside of Boston, and that's my wife Paula, and there I am, and that's where we received the Engineer of the Year award. It was a great thing, and we had a chance to see Boston, which we'd never seen before, and follow the Freedom Trail and all of that. But this really was the culmination of the things that we did. And when I say we, I mean we. Paula and I worked as equal partners in our business for over 40 years. And you think, oh, she was the secretary. This young lady would put in 40, 50, 60 hours a week making the office run when I wasn't there. And I was putting in 60, 70 or more hours a week while I was away and making all of those things go. It was a coordinated effort. And the interesting part is in our office, we have two desks, which you can't see here, but the point is that I'm sitting at one of them. And it's all of probably 7 feet by 6.5 feet or whatever. It's in an L shape. She has one like that too. These are custom made desks. Wait a minute. I'll grab the camera here real quick. Let's see what I can do. Okay. There's her messy desk.
Okay.
And here's my messy desk, which is hard to see. But the point is that they're at keyboard height. They're custom-made wooden desks, and they're perfect for the job because the keyboard is right on a 45 degree at the center of the L. And and then there's a phone there. The keyboard and phone, those are your two instruments. Each one of us has 3 monitors, and those are our basic business instruments to make the business run. And where I was going with this conversation was that she'd be on one side of the room, I'm on the other side of the room. We face each other, but we acted as employees for 8 to 5. And at 5 o'clock, that's when the cocktail hour started. So we would get up and we would be man and wife again, but not until then. We'd be man and wife, and then we'd go upstairs to the other level of our home, and that's where our personal relationship started. We actually have a home. This is our second one like that is one level is business and one level is the home. And it's 2,000 square feet for each. And we still use it that way. Now, we don't have a business. We never had a walk-in business. That was never it, except the UPS and FedEx showed up every day, sometimes twice and 3 times, because they drop off and then pick up and all those other things. We had records that show over 5,000 packages shipped from here in 40 years. Can you believe that? The stuff came in and went out. It was just crazy. And it doesn't
you shipped me some stuff.
I designed stuff.
Yeah.
I custom built a lot of stuff. We can talk about that in the future on a future episode too. But it was my whole life has just been working with my hands and in a soldering iron in one hand and a voltmeter in the other hand, and just doing things that needed to be done. I built hundreds of custom things that were used in broadcast facilities, little boxes with knobs and lights and all that kind of stuff. You name it, I built it. But gosh, those days are gone.
What I like what you say about the desk, just to make your life as efficient as possible, so you're not rummaging around or just you're not overcoming the same little problems or annoyances over and over again. You built what you want. And you know what's interesting? I know that Broadcasters General Store is a sponsor of our show, but if you go visit BGS in Ocala, Florida, their desks are very similar to yours and Paula's, except for one thing. They sit at bar stool height on theirs, so that they can stand up or sit at the same height, but their keyboard's at the right place, and they have 3 monitors, and the keyboard is in the middle of a 45-degree angle of the two wings that come back. So there must be something good to that design that you and Paula have there.
Yeah, it's actually a 90-degree angle, but the 45 the 45 fills the corner, so you're not working into an actual corner. So it's a little more than the width of a keyboard that's cut short and in making the L work. In fact, on a future episode, I'll give you some actual documentation on that, but I'm a real big advocate of having a desk in such a way that it's at keyboard height, as you mentioned, just perfect for the job. Never a keyboard drawer. And we did this going back 20 or 25 years. We've had the desks that long, and they serviced us wonderfully.
I just realized, at my office in Nashville, in the Telos Alliance studio that I'm usually in, that desk is actually a desk that I purchased for my contract engineering business back in probably 1990. So that's been almost 30 years right there. Wow. Wow. Now, Chris Tobin, he lives in Manhattan. So I think Chris has probably had less opportunity to customize his work area, and you gotta work where you are. Am I right about that, Chris?
Yes, you learn how to operate in a restricted workspace. Absolutely. Both living and business. So even some of the businesses, real estate here in Manhattan is pretty high. So even the workshops tend to be somewhat cluttered, small. You'd be surprised what you can do in a closet.
Mark, what do you have some more pictures to look at here?
I let me see. I don't think so, but
Okay.
I wanted to talk about mentoring.
Yeah,
I was
want to
mentoring.
well.
I was mentoring a couple of broadcast engineers even before the SBE had a mentoring program. It made so much sense. I mean, I didn't need any more money. They needed help. Why not? So that's what I did. And but now SBE has the mentoring program. Great idea. Good things. I've got 2 to mentor. So it's that's working out. And my phrase is, I'm the Radio Shack. You've got questions. I've got answers.
So, that's not what we said. We said, you've got questions, we've got batteries. But okay, I get you. Hey, so talk to when I realize you have to assess a new mentee to see where they are learning wise. What do they need? But maybe you can describe a teaching technique that you try to help people through. I mean, you let somebody else just touch a piece of equipment, or I guess what I want to ask is, how do you teach a mentee to think about troubleshooting?
Well, let me go back even further. I think the best way is starting a relationship, at which I have done with the 2 who are remote from me. One in Kansas someplace, I think, and another one out on the East Coast. Anyway, so first thing to do, get on the phone. Hi, I'm Mark, and my qualifications are I work on transmitters and analog studios, and go through the list of the things that I've done that I can advise on, and then I have the mentee say, all right, what do you do? And so we learn each other's capabilities. And so that person knows what questions to ask me. And I don't know, when somebody calls and asks a question, I just give them an answer, and sometimes I say, well, now wait a minute, what are you trying to do here? And when I get that, then I could say, well, now this looks like a good idea to do it this way. So that's kind of how it's gone. 2 of them are local in Minnesota, so they've come by, and I've actually held some classes for them to help them understand things like using an impedance bridge for AM measurements and spectrum analyzers and that kind of stuff, and charged them for it too. I figured, well, if they're going to get something, might as well, they're going to pay me a little bit. Wasn't a lot. It's a couple hours of my time. And my time was, well, at the time I quit, it was only $85 an hour. And I was told many times it should have been $100, but I'm kind of in the middle of nowhere. And I had a lot of really great clients. And the one thing about Minnesota is that there's another town every 30 miles down the road. So clients were just all around me. And I used to service clients out in the Dakotas and Wisconsin and in Iowa, and I shrank the circle down. I finally had to tell some of those people, nope, you're going to have to find somebody else. And it was difficult for some of them, but they did. And that kept me more local to the customers that I retained. And that really worked out well. And I was busy all the time anyway, so nothing bad about that.
Mark, I think one of the number one troubleshooting way of thinking, mantra, that I carried with me, and it served me very well, and then it led me to move on to designing things. But the one troubleshooting mantra was, how is this piece of equipment supposed to work? What does proper operation look like? What does proper operation sound like? And because obviously if it's not working right, it's not working like it should. And so a lot of times people who are new to the business may not really be able to recognize when it is working right. You look at a transmitter and its indications, its meter readings. You need to know what the reading should be if at least those are working right, chances are it is working right. There may be other things to check, like occupied bandwidth, or look for spurious oscillations, things like that. But what do you think about that mantra? You got to first understand and know what proper operation looks and sounds like.
It was easy for me. I came from a broadcasting family, and I was always going around and asking other stations, and back when we had engineers at most stations, before they, when the FCC, before the FCC made it possible for stations not to have engineers, and I would ask 1,000 questions before I walked out the door, even if some of these guys hadn't bathed that day. You see, that seemed to be a common thing back then. But then I came from a radio station where I was doing my folks' radio station, so I knew how that gear worked. And so when I went out in the field, I had a real good understanding of the gear that I ran into. So that just all fell into place. And I guess I'm just lucky from that aspect. But I really did my homework ahead of time. I learned everything I could.
This is I think, a really interesting mindset that so many engineers in broadcasting have, because they have to have it. And if you have this mindset, you're more drawn to it. I had an employee years ago, great guy, nice fella. And after working for me for about 3 months, he said, Kirk, when am I going to get trained on all the different pieces of equipment that we service? And I said, I'll make up a name here and say, Jerry, there's no way I could possibly train you on all the pieces of equipment that we work on. We don't service 10 different models of copiers. We service probably 200 different models, 200 different pieces of broadcast gear. And I can't, give you a training manual for each and every one of those. We have to learn the basics of electronics, and we have to then understand what this piece of equipment is supposed to do as part of a system, and what's its function. And then what does good operation look and sound like? And I think it's fascinating that so many engineers, you especially, Mark Persons, but also Chris Tobin. Chris, how did you kind of develop this mindset where you began to understand what things are supposed to do and how they're supposed to work, so then you could get them back into that shape when they broke?
Actually, believe it or not, at a young age, I used to just take things apart. Sheer curiosity. Take it apart, put it back together, watch it. And over time, you get a sort of like a sort of, what is it? Not an instinct, but intuition. You look at something like a copier, say, copier. You say, wow, that's interesting. You watch it and you research. I mean, I read before the computers were popular and tablets and everything else. I mean, I had at home as a kid, we had Funk and Wagnall's Encyclopedia, Britannica, Books of Knowledge, and many other things. And I used to get my hands on any type of technical manual that was available. I had the whole library of Bell System operating books, the white books with the yellow and blue ribbon on them. I could tell you anything about a 1A2 system and then some, and a Merlin and a ComKey 416. Part of that was because sheer curiosity, but also I was using that stuff in places I was working part-time. And I started need to know, and I just built on that. Transmitters. I had books on transmitters, tube sets, Western Electric AM transmitters. People look at me, what's a Western Electric AM transmitter? Yes, that's right. Who knew? Who knew Western Electric made AM transmitters? And I had all kinds of stuff. And I would just read it and learn it, and that's how I go today. I mean, to this day, I have 6 hard drives, portable hard drives of PDFs of documents and manuals and things that are just, most of it is out of print. I've been fortunate enough to get the PDFs of it or make my own. And I research. It's history. Believe it or not, I had somebody recently ask me about, what was it? They were asking me something about a transmitter. No, it was an antenna system. And I actually found my Jack Layton book. And I said, you know what? In the book, it talks about how this directional arrangement is, and this is the type of phaser you probably have. I said, I'll make a copy and compare the coils and caps and see if the configuration is similar to what you have. Calls me back. He says, oh, my God, it's exactly the same. How did you know? I'm like, it's not that I knew. It's just this is part of, what you do. It's like a mechanic. I've had friends of mine who are retired mechanics that had their own garages, and they could listen to a car engine, tell you exactly which part of the engine was in trouble or not, or how to tune it better. It's just, that's one of those things. And I'm sure Mark has, over the years, come across things in a transmitter or an exciter or a situation, go, this works by factory spec, but I found if you tweak it just a little bit in this direction, you can be surprised what you get. I mean, I worked with Tom Jones from the Call T Jones Consulting, and on many occasions I had the opportunity to watch him tweak an antenna system, and I'm like, wow, is that something you find in the books? He goes, no, it's one of those things I learned over the years, and it actually works better than the rules claim it should be. The rules of electronics.
Yeah.
But Mark, right? I'm sure Mark can tell you the exact same thing on many things he's found.
Absolutely. And, I worked with Mark Mueller a number of times, too. I didn't actually tune in AM directionals. I built them, and then he would come out and tune them. But I remember one system that we were tuning up, couldn't quite get it to work. And finally, he put his hands on two knobs and turned one way and the other way. And darned if it didn't all fall in. I mean, it's just one of those things.
It's true. That's true. I've seen that done. Yes, absolutely. I worked with a guy. What was his name? Sargent. He was an engineer. His name was something Sargent. I can't think of his first name. He was with RCA Labs, RCA Transmitters. And he did the exact same thing on a project I was working on. He came up to the Continental FM transmitter. He goes, all right, I see what the problem is. Hang on a second. Let's tune this baby. It was a tube transmitter, and he did the two hands. Took his two hands, and he goes, watch the dip, watch the peak. Ah, here we go. We look at the spectrum analyzer. Perfect. Look at that. That's a nice spiral. I like that. 2:00 in the morning at a transmitter. So I'm looking at this going, okay, I think I know what just happened with the Smith chart on this spectrum analyzer. Wow. I'm sitting there going, nothing, no book, no manual, nothing I have could even reference what he just did. And he just looks at me. This was young, when I was very young. He just looks, kid, that's what experience brings you. Sometimes a burn mark on your hand, sometimes success. When you get both, then you smile. I never forget these things. But it's true. It's true.
You're a funny guy.
It's true.
Oh, gee. Hey, we're going to take our last break, and when we come back, we're going to ask both Mark and Chris to come up with a tip of the week, something to leave us with, some words of wisdom or something we can put to use right away, or at least if we come across whatever they're talking about. So that's coming up. Our show, This Week in Radio Tech, with me, Kirk Harnack, Chris Tobin, and Mark Persons, our guest, is brought to you in part by the folks at Lawo. We'll continue in just a minute.
There has probably never been a better time in history to buy a new radio mixing console. Today's consoles are more sophisticated than ever, with more features and functions than you can shake a stick at. But have you noticed how complicated they are? There's a sea of knobs and switches and displays and buttons. Some of them look like you might need a pilot's license to do your show. Well, a board doesn't have to be complicated to be powerful. Just look at the new Ruby mixing surface from Lawo. The first thing you notice is how smooth and streamlined it is. Ruby has lots of cool tech, but what it doesn't have is that confusing ocean of buttons that clutter things up. Now, we all know that there are some console features the jock only uses once in a while, so why dedicate controls to them? Ruby fixes this problem by moving those once-in-a-blue-moon controls to a touch-sensitive, customizable GUI that happily shares screen space with your other studio software, helping you fight control room clutter. Thanks to this design innovation, talent that use Ruby produce smoother shows with less errors. Controls that are used the most fall naturally to hand, while functions that rarely need adjustment are easily controlled with just a couple of clicks in the context-sensitive GUI. And Ruby has cool features you won't find on other boards, like Auto Mix, an intelligent gain writing function that guarantees the perfect mix for multi-mic morning shows and call-in segments. Dual-mode snapshots that instantly switch the motorized faders between on-air and production modes, and enough DSP and I/O options to make even your pro sound pals green with envy. And because quality is as important to Lawo as it is to you, every console is proudly built to fanatically precise standards at Lawo's own factory in Germany. If you're ready to declutter your control room, do yourself a favor. Check out the new Ruby and the other cool Lawo radio tech at www.lawo.com/TWiRT.
Thanks to Lawo for sponsoring This Week in Radio Tech. Go to lavo.com/TWiRT, take you right to the radio gear, and let them know that we sent you. All right, we're going to wrap up This Week in Radio Tech pretty quickly, but we always get a tip or two of the week. And actually, I've got one as well. So why don't I go ahead and do mine? Make sure that Mark and Chris have time to think about theirs. So I'm at a TV station in Shreveport, Louisiana, and it's one of the last local home-owned TV stations in the country. And they're an ABC affiliate. It's a KTBS, and they do lots of live remotes. In fact, they're doing some live stuff from a festival tomorrow evening. I may get to stay for that. But one thing they've done here is they've installed some new technology to get rid of their very expensive POTS phone lines and replace them with a VoIP service to do so that reporters can call in and get their IFB, to get their cues in their ear. And part of that is this guy. See if I can untangle it here. This guy right here. It's a Telos VX system, and we've seen TV stations all across the country switching out to a Telos VX system that natively speaks voice over IP, talks to their existing VoIP PBX or an asterisk system or off-site hosted VoIP service. But on this, you can't quite see it here, but on this phone down here at the bottom, the last two lines are IFB lines, and these IFB lines tie directly. Once they're get auto answered, they tie into the intercom system here. So a remote reporter is told by the producer, which IFB to dial into, and the remote reporter goes out on remote, dials the phone number. They get connected. They hear a quick interactive voice response IVR tree, and they select the IFB number that the producer assigned, and bam, they're on the intercom with the producer. And so they can, they've been given their cues, told what to do, move left, move right. Do we have anything from the newsmaker? Does the mayor have anything to say? That kind of stuff can all be done very conveniently over SIP VoIP and save a ton of money over POTS lines. I've been to TV stations where they are saving literally $3,000 a month after dropping all their POTS lines that they use. So there's a tip. Go to SIP VoIP, and of course, my friends at Telos will be glad to help you out with that. That's my tip. Mark Persons, do you have a tip you'd like to leave with our listeners?
Actually, I'm just sending out an article to Radio World tomorrow morning, and what it'll do is it'll talk about new guys or new women could be too, who are working on AM directionals, and they might be IT people, and they don't understand what they're doing. The tip is don't do anything until you've checked everything first. Don't start turning the knobs. But the article will explain all of that, the do's and the don'ts. But I have one more tip for you. When I'm at a checkout counter at some retail store, whatever it is, I tell the checkout, never say checkout to an old person.
Okay. All right. What? Choose your words carefully, huh?
That's it. There you go.
All right. Well, we'll watch for your Radio World article. It's quick do's and don'ts about directionals. Don't go cranking knobs until you read this article.
That's it. Okay, that's it. Good. Leave it out of tolerance until you read the article.
Leave it out of tolerance. Yeah, I like that. Leave it out of tolerance. Let the problem continue until you read this. It's
probably a month from publication too, so it might be a while.
Yeah, just be out of tolerance from. Well, or call Mark Mueller. He'll help you out, right? I don't know if he still goes out and does those things. We need to have Mark as a guest on our show. He'd be very interesting.
He is. Have you or have not had him?
I don't think we have yet. Chris, do you remember if we need to have him on?
No, I don't think so.
Okay.
I'll contact him.
Okay. Well, he's a hard guy to get a hold of, mostly because he is so busy. I mean,
good for him.
Can't hardly get him to take on a new project.
Does he respond to subaudible tones?
Oh, that's his thing too. That's right.
He made the best one on the planet.
He did. And now, since then, more recently, his wife passed away. It was cancer, but he's over that now. But she was a very integrated part of his business, too, because I think she did most of the assembly and things like that. So anyway, times change.
Chris Tobin, you got a tip of the week for us.
A simple tip. I have here two devices that do the same thing. Let me see if we get this right. Notice they produce light. However, The one in this hand here, you're familiar with. You've seen these before. Doesn't do what this one in my other hand does because of a simple thing called rare metals. Look at that. We now have. Now, the reason I point this out is recently I was doing some work inside a cabinet, and using the iPhone or smartphone flashlight was not ideal. As one will know, you try to lay upside down and try and manipulate and see what the serial number is of something. It doesn't work that way. So invest in one of these little guys. It's a handy one with the magnet on the end, and this way you can work on it. By the way, the device is plugged into attached to is a Ubiquiti 5.8 Light Beam Generation 2. It's one of the ones we'll be using tomorrow. And this light was provided for and by at 2 trade shows by Josh Bone Associates. So maybe give him a call, do some business with him, you get a flashlight. It's handy. Nice little magnet. There you go.
That's a great tip.
Everybody loves using smartphone flashlights, but I can't tell how many times I watch people drop it. I'm like, okay, now what are you going to do? Good question.
Yeah.
So I get the lights with the magnets on. It's worth it.
It is, and you're right. They're cheap, and sometimes they're even free. My smartphone has got a case that has some pretty fancy lighting on it, like that, or on the back, like that, but no magnet. And so, I dropped this down into my BMW engine a few days ago.
There you go.
That was a joy. Yeah. It was a joy to retrieve.
I should correct myself. It's Bone Broadcast Services. Let's make sure we got that right.
BOHN, Bone Broadcast Services.
That's right.
Good deal. Hey, we got to go. Mark Persons, thank you so much for taking an hour of your time to be with us and for putting those pictures together. It was really interesting. I love the 4-year-old Mark climbing up to the ceiling while mom looks adoringly, I guess.
I think she was more worried than anything. But it's always fun being on with you. So let's do this again soon.
I would love to. Absolutely. All right. Hey, and Chris Tobin, thank you for being here as well, man. Appreciate you being here.
No problem. I love it. Thanks again, Mark.
Have fun with the.
Thank you.
Have fun with the scout camp. I'm going to be. I'll be driving across. I'll be driving across Mississippi. Hey, I may be installing an Axia console this weekend. So depends on if I'll have all the stuff I need. Hey, we're going to go. I want to thank Suncast for producing today's show. Another great job. Appreciate that very much, Suncast, and have a good time away from the office. And this show, by the way, for those of you watching live, you may not see it posted until next week on Tuesday or so, because Suncast is just about to head out the door. And we got another great show coming up next week. If I can get to it real fast, I will tell you that... well, let's see. I'm waiting on a couple answers. Jorge Garza from McAllen, Texas. He's one of the earliest adopters of audio over IP. Jorge Garza is going to be with us in 2 weeks on June 27th. We'll find out next week as soon as we get there. All right, we'll see you next week on This Week in Radio Tech. Bye-bye.